Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of your concept checking input session. Part 1 was all about using concept check questions, and this one is all about using timelines. Timelines are a really useful tool for language teachers, particularly to clarify language which has something to do with time. For example, tenses. Some other structures as well, and some lexis even. Timelines are a really useful way of making something abstract, like the abstract concept of time, a little bit more concrete and visual for our learners. Again, timelines are used to help our learners understand the meaning of language during the clarification stage of the lesson. So would we use timelines in a skills or a systems lesson? Right, a systems lesson. Useful to clarify grammar, vocabulary, functions. Okay, so let's start off with an example. As I mentioned in the previous input session, language does not exist in a vacuum in the real world, so it shouldn't in the classroom either. Language really should come out of a context, hopefully an engaging one that's going to be meaningful for our learners. We could do this in 3 main ways. Through a text, in which case we'd start with a lead-in on the topic in general, then we'd do some comprehension work with the text, and then focus in on our target language using marker sentence from the text. You could do it via a situation. This is where the teacher would set up a situation using pictures, using various ways of engaging the learner's attention, making it as interactive as possible. Or we might do it through a diagnostic test or a task. This could be a freer practice activity or a freer speaking activity, which generates the use of the language, or it could be a more controlled test where we find out how well the learners can use the language already and then clarify what they need. Okay? In my example, we're going to use a very brief situation. Okay? So, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine. This is Tom. How old do you think he is? Right, he's 22. Okay? He's just graduated from college. And the other day, he was walking in the park, he was walking his dog, and he met Julia. And boom, he developed quite a crush on Julia. They started talking, they became friends, but Tom really wants more than friendship from Julia. So what are some of the techniques you think he used to try and get her to go on a date with him? Okay, yes, he actually did decide to buy her a present. And he thought, what better present for her to get to know the real me than my favourite book? So, he gave her a book, but she'd already read it. Okay, was that a good present? Not particularly. So there's our marker sentence. He gave her a book, but she'd already read it. What does she'd mean? She'd, the contraction is she had. Okay, so he gave her a book, but she had already read it. Now here's a timeline that would illustrate that for the learners. So as you can see, we have 2 events, the giving of the book and her reading the book. We'll analyse this example in a little bit more detail in just a few moments, but just to show you here, that's our marker sentence. He gave her a book, but she had already read it. Okay, so let's look at the features of this timeline together. Here's the marker sentence. Okay, do you remember? And what's our target language? Right, she had already read it. Do you know the name of that tense? It's the past perfect. All right, so here are the features or the components of our timelines. We start off with a long horizontal line on the board. Now to anchor our learners in time, in the present moment, we're going to plot now in the middle. So anything to the left of that now line would be the past, and then anything to the right of that now line will be the future. Okay, and we can mark that for our learners as well, more explicitly. Okay, so first event that we're going to plot on here is he gave her a book. That happened in the past. And then the next one, her reading the book, which happened before. Okay, so we use an X to mark an event, and we use arrows to show connections between events. You might also want to illustrate it using visuals and pictures as well. Okay, so let's have a little, let's look at some more examples. I've got 5 timelines for you on the right of the next slide, and 5 example sentences. And what I'd like you to do is to match the example sentence on the left with the timeline on the right. Okay, the first one we'll do together. It should be quite easy because it's really similar to this example. Okay, so you can see number 1. My friend gave me a book, but I'd already read it. Which of those timelines, A through C, represents that sentence? Good, it was C. Okay, so number 1 is C. Pause the video and look at the other 4 sentences and match them to the other 4 timelines. Okay, how'd you go? Let's look together at the other 4. So number 2, I'll have finished the book by Friday. That's B. Okay, so we look at now. We're kind of flashing forward in time to Friday. And at some point before that, I'll finish the book. We don't know when. And we can indicate that using a question mark. Okay? We don't know when exactly. All right, what about number 3? That's E. Okay, so we have 3 consecutive actions. Went, bought, and read. Okay, so they're 3 short consecutive events which all happened before now in the past. Okay, number 4. I've read all 3 books in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and that one goes with D. Now, this is very similar to E, only we're looking here at the present perfect for experience, not the past simple. We don't know exactly when that person read all 3 books in the trilogy. We don't even know which order he or she read them in. All we know is that at some point in that person's life, up to now, they read those 3 books. Okay? And let's have a look at number 5. That is clearly A. I was reading when the lights went out. The convention for continuous tenses, so the tenses that that are combined with some form of to be with an ing verb, we represent with a kind of wiggly line. Okay, here we have the main event, which is the lights going out, and then you can use a dotted wiggly line to show that the event may or may not have continued. We don't know. Okay, the important thing here is that the reading is a longer event than the lights going out. Okay, so those are some more examples of timelines. Now it's over to you. On the next slide we have some sentences, and I'd like you to draw a timeline for each one. So here are the 6 sentences. Some of the diagrams will be similar to those that were we looked at in the previous slide. Don't forget your basic elements. You need a line, okay, that represents time. You need now. You need a line to indicate the present. and then you might want to label them. So draw 6 of that template, and then add X's, wiggly lines, arrows as you see fit for each of those 6 sentences. Okay, when you're ready, press play again. Okay, how did you get on? Was that fun? So let's have a look on the next slide. We've got some examples of timelines that may illustrate those sentences. So in the first one, we can see that the action of watching is an extended action that's been going on for 3 hours up until the present. You may have a dotted line here to show that he might continue to watch TV in the future. That would be fine. Okay, and again in this one, when we arrived, that's the second event, they had already left. It's the first event. Again, you may have an arrow here to show the link between the two. There's no hard and fast rules about timelines, just conventions to make the language a little bit more visual for our learners. Next one, thankfully I'll have finished this course by the end of the month. Is that true for you? So this is now. We're flashing forward to the end of the month, and then at some point before that, finishing the course. This is the future perfect tense. So that shows the relationship between the future time marker and the event. All right, let's have a look at this one. I lost my keys. This one's fairly simple. An event in the past. Done. All right. That's the past simple. The next one, when she finally arrived, I'd been sitting in the pub for an hour. So this is the past perfect continuous, and it's the wiggly line here to represent the continuous or the ongoing nature or the duration of that event. That's the sitting in the pub. And then when she finally arrived, that's this moment here. All of this happened in the past, and you can see that by its position on the timeline. And then finally, I'm living in London at the moment. Again, the continuous aspect of the ing form of the verb, indicating an extended action and may or may not continue in the future. All right, how'd you get on? Okay, so let's bring the first part of this input session together with this part and look how we can integrate concept check questions with timelines. Just as a reminder, here's the recipe for our concept check questions. Okay, we've got the target language. I gave her a book, but she'd already read it. We've got the marker sentence there, and we've got the teacher, the students. We've identified the target language. What we need to do now is to write some statements that identify the meaning. Okay, so it means I gave her a book in the past. It means before this time she read the book, and I guess you could add that it wasn't particularly a good present. And then again we just flip those statements into questions. When did I give her the book? Did she read it before or after I gave it to her? And was it a good present? Okay, so let's look at integrating those into a clarification stage. I'm going to do it as if you're my students and imagining those answers. Are you ready? All right, so here's our marker sentence. This is time. This is now. When did I give her the book? In the past, the present, or the future? Right, the past. Okay. Did she read the book before or after I gave it to her? Before, correct. And was it a good present? No. All right, so that brings us to the end of our timelines session. If you have any questions, you can ask your tutor. In the meantime, thanks for watching.